This is Andrew Rochford, host of the Rochford Files, and for this segment, we've got another instance of liberals trying to get the term over of Latinx. And what you'll see when I show this tweet is that it's going to blow up in a negative way into this reporter's face. This is Gene Guerrero of the LA Times, and this tweet right here is in relation to the California governor recall election that is ongoing for Gavin Newsom. Democratic outreach to Latino voters on the California recall election is not working. I've been speaking to young Latinx, and almost none of them have any idea what is going on. And this is really, really bad. Before I address what you think is really bad, Gene Guerrero, let's go with what the Hispanic community thinks is really, really bad. And that is trying to force a term onto them which the community, by and large, doesn't want. Because what recent polling has shown is only 3% of them actually prefer the term Latinx. And what makes this worse is the fact that you think older people don't like the term, but you think it's just a generational divide here with, oh, the young people, the cool, hip young people. They're the ones who like the term Latinx. And the old people prefer the traditional Latino Hispanic term. No, if you had any understanding of uh, being connected to their community, you would know across the board that none of the Hispanic people want to be called Latinx. That's conservatives, liberals, and leftists alike. None of them want that. And you also have to keep in mind one of the reasonings behind the strong dislike and rejection for the term is the fact that, you know, by and large, this they view it as a academic colonizer term. And if there's one thing that this that people really don't like, especially people of color, is when you do use colonizing terms or talking points. And that's where this term started from in academia. But back to the point of what she thought was really bad, and that's the fact that a lot of people may not know what's really going on in this recall election, which, by the way, the margins, and it's about a 1% margin in favor of against the idea of recalling Gavin Newsom. And what you'll notice is with working class people in this country is once you go outside the white working class, you're more likely to run into people who are non-voters. And that's probably what she is referring to as really bad in this situation. But the reality is, this Latinx is just goes to show you how much of a disconnect that liberals have from the Hispanic community in the United States. And when you go back to this election with Joe Biden and how one of the things President Biden ran on was trying to fix the issue at the border and the fact that you're not going to that has been proven to be a major lie, because Joe Biden has not only increased the amount of people in the cages, he reopened a facility which liberal outrage, by the way, got closed during the Trump presidency. And what makes it worse is putting even more people in these cages, even during this pandemic, which, by the way, it's not going away. It keeps going up and down in waves. And when he added even more people into those cages, which, by the way, is 730+% full, it was done during one of the upward waves of COVID. And this right here is how you start to lose voters in the Hispanic community, in addition to pandering to them in condescending ways which they would not like to be pandered to. And that's just for the people in the community who continue to participate in these two-party elections, which by and large do not work for them, especially as the Democratic Party continues to block to the left, when what you saw during the previous two presidential runs by Bernie Sanders is the Hispanic community was the strongest coalition in his support in that in his base. Then what you also notice is this working class Hispanic coalition in this country would very much be supportive of populism, other progressive policies, and having their racial issues addressed with left socialist policy. And a good example of what happened is in Nevada, where the Hispanic community there flipped Hispanic Democratic establishment Democratic chair to a social Democratic chair, to the point where the establishment in Nevada took the money and went home. And that's an example of what you could do if you actually address their needs instead of placating to them with condescending terms such as Latinx. And if they continue to do that, they're just only going to continue to alienate the voters that could potentially support the Democratic Party. And that's just going to leave the door open for them to either not vote or support a left-wing third party, because what you'll notice is, I think, if a third party ever takes off in this country, I think more of the Hispanic community would gravitate towards that, as opposed to the Republican Party, even though it is easy to underestimate the amount of Hispanic people in this country will go to the right. But it is part of what happens when you're only in a two-party system. And if they are still under the mindset of, well, I don't like this group, so I'm just going to go to the second group, then that's where they're going to go. But it's also easy to ignore the evidence from this past election, where Donald Trump actually gained supporters from his first run as president in 2016. And if they continue to fail to address the needs of the Hispanic community, and not only that, panders to them with terms like that, they're just going to continue to see the 60 to 70% number, that pretty much an inverse of how white people vote Democrat compared to Republican, dwindle to a more of a closer to an even split over time. And this next tweet from Jean Guerrero will show how much of a disconnect that she has as a liberal, because she thinks that this outrage is just right wing. And what you'll see is it's just flat out not true. If you go to the Latinx on Twitter, you're going to see a lot more meaning this time around compared to previous discussions and trends about it. And when this term first came up, I believe I first learned of it sometime last year. I asked my wife, who is Mexican by the way, about this term, and she was familiar with it, and she didn't even know what the term was. And then she just told me that nobody really cares about the term, and that they would not have any real, they would not prefer to be called this term whatsoever. And it was that, and this was before polling even came out asking the community about this term. And this is just an example of what will happen. You're just going to see a revolt, and people reject liberals when they continue to force these terms down, especially when you're not following through on making changes to improve their lives.